I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and Verizon users, you've got a couple of awesome Android handsets to choose from this holiday season. One of those is a Motorola DROID RAZR, which was announced a couple of weeks ago and is available now for $299. Now this sucker packs a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core processor, an 8-megapixel camera, a 4.3-inch display, and more. Then you have the HTC Rezound over here, the first device by HTC in the US to support Beats by Dr. Dre. And it also has some awesome specs. Dual-core 1.5 gigahertz processor, an 8-megapixel camera, and Android 2.3 as well. So two high-end 4G LTE Android phones on Verizon. But you know what this is? This is a dogfight. So only one of these can take home the gold medal. Which one will it be? We have to find out. But first I'm going to give some love to my friends at Best Buy because they hook us up with phones like this and like this for use in our one-paw bandit game. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile, regardless of whether you get the RAZR or the Rezound, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up your email. They'll help you set up your Beats if you get the Rezound. And they'll help you set up email, web, and more. So when you walk out that door, you're good to go at Best Buy Mobile. Let's take a look at these. RAZR, Rezound, thin form factor, or Beats technology. Which one will win? We'll find out starting right now. So look, if you want a 4G LTE phone on Verizon, you've got quite a few options this holiday season. Two of those are here. Now here's the HTC Rezound, here's the Motorola DROID RAZR, and the third one, the Galaxy Nexus, well, we don't really even know when it's coming. It's coming sometime by the end of this year, but people are frustrated. It's kind of irritating when you don't have a release date, but these are two of three awesome 4G LTE handsets. Now these are a little bit different, even though they both have LTE capabilities, they're a little bit different in terms of specs and design, features, and more. So let's start with the Rezound. This thing has a dual-core 1.5 gigahertz Snapdragon processor. It's got a 4.3-inch, and this is where it really excels. It has a 4.3-inch 720p HD display. It's a Super AMOLED display, and excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Galaxy Nexus. 4.3-inch 720p display. Ignore my little spastic thing that just happened there. But 4.3 inches, beautiful display, 8-megapixel camera with 1080p HD video recording. You've got a front-facing camera on this bad boy, and then down here you got your capacitive buttons. Now, this is running Android 2.3.4 right now with HTC Sense version 3.5. So you're seeing kind of a revision to Sense. If you're coming from the Thunderbolt or you're coming from an older HTC device, you're going to see some updates, and mostly you're going to see it around kind of the design. You'll notice that down here it says all apps, for example, and personalized, so you get some new text. You'll see that the tabs down here are a little bit different. Frequent downloaded, Verizon wireless, and more. So a little bit of a change there. Otherwise, a relatively, I wouldn't say it's a thick device. It feels a little better in the hand than the DROID RAZR, just because even though it's thin, it's very elongated, very kind of hard to hold in the hand for extended periods. This one's a little easier, and it has a 1,620 milliamp hour battery. So hold on to all that information, and here's the DROID RAZR. Now this bad boy came out about a week or a couple days before the HTC Rezound. It's all kind of a blur in this holiday season, but it has a dual-core 1.2 gigahertz TI OMAP processor, so a little bit slower on the clock speed, but it's kind of interesting, and we'll get into this in part 1 and later in part 2 as to the speed differences of these two devices. 4.3-inch display here. You do have PenTile. It's a Super AMOLED Advanced display with PenTile technology, so the display actually looks better. It's a Super AMOLED display. You'll notice that the colors are a lot darker. They look better, but still PenTile is there. It's not as noticeable as the DROID Bionic. So if you're coming from that, you hate PenTile, take another look at this, and let me wait for this to focus in so you can kind of get an idea as to what it looks like. So the PenTile is definitely there. When you really focus in on it, you can see it, but it's not nearly as evident as the DROID Bionic, as the DROID 3. Some of these previous devices that had PenTile, or DROID X2, some of these previous devices that had PenTile technology. Now it has an 8-megapixel camera on the back with 1080p HD video recording. Kind of resembles a DROID X2, if you will, in terms of design. Now, non-removable battery here, but it does have a 1,780 milliamp hour battery, which has performed surprisingly well in tests. Because it's so thin, you'll see over here you have two things. You have your micro SIM card slot. It does take a micro SIM, and a micro SD card slot. And then up top you have your HDMI port, your micro USB charging port, and your 3.5mm headphone jack. And then over here, power button, volume rocker. So a very svelte device, no physical camera button. Then over here, you kind of get this typical, and it's funny because this thing looks just like an HTC device. They really don't change the designs around. Between these, you'll see the typical 3.5mm headphone jack, power button. You got your volume rocker over here on the right side, and then your micro USB charging port over here on the left side. Beats audio pre-installed on this one as well, so if music's your thing, you do get a pair of Beats earbuds in the box. Both of these phones are $299 at Verizon retail stores, although I'm sure you'll find some great holiday specials at various retailers like Amazon Wireless, Wirefly, places like that. So be sure to take a look at those if you're buying for for a family member, somebody special. And heck, even if you're buying for somebody that's not special, it's good to take a look. That's a bad joke, but hey, you know what? We're gonna keep rolling. You can see here, you know, design typical HTC, got some texturized goodness here on the battery door, and like I said, Sense 3.5. So let's take a look at what comes pre-installed on this bad boy. And I'm going to skip straight over to the Verizon tab, and you can see Backup Assistant, Blockbuster, Hot Pursuit, Amazon Kindle. Half of this is probably garbage you're not going to use. Mobile Hotspot, VCast Music, Verizon Mobile, Mobile IM, NFL Mobile, Let's Golf 2, Slacker rather, Video Surf, VCast Videos, and VZ Navigator. Stacker, that's like a bum version of Slacker. Stacker. And then you can see Let's Golf 2. So, you know, obviously I don't use Let's Golf 2. I don't use Hot Pursuit. The sad part is you can't uninstall these. Verizon has the bloatware's on and it can't be removed, unlike AT&T and Sprint devices. They've done a really good job recently of kind of listening to their consumers. Now, one thing I've kind of noticed about this, and take a look when I go into the applications drawer here, you'll really notice that it kind of stutters a little bit. I notice a little bit of a lag on the Rezound that I don't notice on the Droid RAZR. I feel like it's a little bit more smooth. Now, part of that is because HTC Sense is just a very resource-heavy user interface. That's one thing to keep in mind. Also, you know, again, it's just interesting to see this kind of carry over from the Evo 3D, the Sensation 4G, some of these more recent HTC handsets, which you can see, it seems like it just takes a second for everything to load up, which in comparison to the Droid RAZR, which I'll show you shortly, you don't really see that very often. So let me focus on the personalization here, because, you know, one thing Sense does really, really well is it offers some great personalization choices. So you come in here, and not only can you add widgets to the home screen, which there are 7 home screens, by the way, you can customize your apps, shortcuts, folders, but you can also change your ringtones. You can change your ringtones, man. This is 2011, yeah. You can change your skin, change your wallpaper, your lock screen, and change your shortcuts. So let me show you the new lock screen that debuted in Sense 3.0 and kind of carries over into 3.5. You'll see here, instead of the typical HTC look, I pull the ring up and let it go to activate it, or I can use one of my quick access, like let's say I'm sending an email to somebody. I can press it, let go, and it brings me into the mail application, which of course I don't have any set up right now. Now you can change both of those around. You can change the shortcuts and you can change the lock screen style. So let's say, I'm a big weather person. I always like to know what the weather is, but you can change it to stocks, you can make it a watch, friend stream, and more. So I'm going to go over here to weather, I'm going to apply it, and then now when I come out of here and bring it back, you can see what the weather is, which for whatever reason it's 75 degrees on November 21st. That's pretty freaking unacceptable if you ask me, but it's a nice summer day, even though it's almost halfway through fall, almost winter in Charlotte. So you can see the weather there. I can immediately pull up and get out of that. So 7 home screens, typical carousel rotation here. And then over here, you've got, and I'm going to try to go through this a little bit faster because we've got a lot of ground to cover on both of these devices. You have Motorola's custom user interface over here on top of Android 2.3.5. And I really see, some speed differences. I mean, I feel like this just operates a little bit faster. And perhaps it's because Motorola's UI isn't as intensive as HTC Sense, but I just feel like things load up relatively quickly, with little to no lag, easily get into text messaging. The transitions are nice, which is something they do really, really well on this. You can see the transitions in and out of applications. And then, of course, when I go between portrait and landscape mode on the Motorola is fantastic. Now, let's take a look at what comes pre-installed on this bad boy, also of which can't be uninstalled. You got all apps recent downloaded in the Verizon Wireless. And, of course, I can add my own folders, or I can go straight to the market. Now, on this, you get device setup. You get IM, Mobile Hotspot, My Verizon, NFL Mobile, which actually is a pretty useful application, VCast Tones, Verizon Video, Visual Voicemail, and VZ Navigator. Again, can't uninstall it, but at least it doesn't come with those obnoxious games like Let's Golf 2. Oh, I feel like it did come with Let's Golf 2. Yeah, it does. Let's Golf 2, it just didn't put it in the Verizon. Like I just corrected myself like that. Video Surf, of course, on there as well. But Madden, NFL, Let's Golf, I don't have any use for that. And a lot of people don't, but you can't uninstall it, which is pretty frustrating without doing some serious hacking to the device. Now this thing has 5 home screens, so a little bit less than the Rezound. It follows in that typical Verizon suit where the applications scroll from left to right instead of like the Photon where they scroll from or scroll up and down in typical Android format. So little things like that you see. And one thing I covered on, I was on Engadget's podcast on Friday, and one thing we were kind of talking about is how from Motorola device to Motorola device, there's no consistent experience. I mean, it's really depending on which device you use. Some applications go one way, some applications look one way. It's very inconsistent across the board. Again, the average consumer is really not going to care about that, but still just something I thought I would point out. So let's take a look while we have this one in our hand at text messaging. And again, 4.3-inch display here, and look how thin this device is. Makes it a little bit, maybe a little bit awkward to hold in the hand. It is a little bit wider, and of course it's thin, so your hand kind of grips around it a little bit differently. But we can see here 4.3-inch display, and because it is a Super AMOLED display, you'll notice that the colors are darkened. So no more gray color schemes, really everything's kind of dark blue and black. And we're going to say the rumor dog jumped over the fuzzy orange. The rumor dog jumped over the fuzzy orange and ate it. It's pretty quick and easy to type on. Now what I really like is because of the longer display, 4.3 inches, it's easy to type in landscape. So like I always say, if you're coming from a device like a BlackBerry or something with a physical QWERTY keyboard, it's relatively easy to get used to the Droid RAZR. And like I've said before in previous videos, Motorola's multi-touch keyboard I think is one of the fantastic, or the most fantastic keyboards available on Android. It really does a good job. Auto correction is very good, which brings me right over into this one, which I didn't ask. Oh, I was doing testing between this phone and the Droid RAZR. So bring it over here, and I can say the rumor dog is ready for the weekend and for Thanksgiving, which is kind of out of order, but a little bit harder to type on. Still a 4.3-inch display. Now, where this really shines, and you don't really see it in the video, but I mean, it's just a gorgeous display. It's 720p. It's noticeable all the way down to just typing. I mean, the whites are incredibly vivid. I feel like, let's see how many puns I can do with cell phones, like vivid. Whites are really vivid. You know, I think this thing really just skyrockets into space in terms of the display. And I mean, it really, really just looks good. I mean, I'd say it's in another galaxy, maybe the Galaxy Nexus. I mean, it's just that, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Another bad joke, but that's okay. Landscape mode, also very easy to get used to. I'd say the keyboard is better on the Droid RAZR. I think it's easier to get used to. That said, if you're coming from a Sense device, this is going to be pretty quick and easy to get used to. And I turned it off, but you have HTC Trace as well, which kind of acts as Swipe, because Swipe doesn't come pre-installed, though you do get the ability to access it on this bad boy. So we'll go in here and we'll change over the keyboard. We'll get Swipe turned, or get Trace input turned on. Turn it on. We're going to make the trace color blue. Blue. And then we'll come in here and say, hey there. Just like that. So just like Swipe, quick and easy to use, also on a 4.3-inch display. Better display over here, better input in my opinion with keyboards over on the Droid RAZR.